Little boy asks firefighter a simple question. He breaks down in tears. Captain Mike Rodriguez had been fighting fires for 15 years, but nothing could have prepared him for the call that came in at 3:47 a.m. on a cold Tuesday morning in November. The address was 1247 Oak Street, a modest two-story house in a quiet, residential neighborhood where families with young children lived their peaceful lives, never imagining that tragedy could strike so suddenly and mercilessly. When Engine 19 arrived at the scene, the house was already engulfed in flames that reached toward the dark sky like angry orange fingers. The fire had started in the kitchen, investigators would later determine, caused by a faulty electrical wire that had been smoldering undetected for hours, before finally igniting the curtains and spreading with devastating speed throughout the home. Mike and his crew worked frantically to control the blaze while searching for survivors. The neighbors had gathered on the street, many of them crying and holding each other as they watched the Rodriguez family's home, no relation to Captain Rodriguez, despite sharing the same surname, being consumed by the relentless fire. "There's a family inside," shouted Mrs. Henderson, the elderly neighbor who had called 911. "David and Maria Rodriguez, and their little boy Tommy. He's only 6 years old." Mike's heart raced as he and his partner Jake Williams entered the smoke-filled house, their breathing apparatus allowing them to navigate through the toxic fumes that would have killed them within minutes. The heat was unbearable, even through their protective gear, and the smoke was so thick they could barely see their hands in front of their faces. They found David and Maria Rodriguez in the master bedroom, overcome by smoke inhalation, but still alive. Mike and Jake quickly carried them to safety, where paramedics immediately began working to stabilize them. But as Mike looked back at the burning house, he realized with growing horror that they hadn't found the little boy. "Where's Tommy?" Maria Rodriguez gasped as the paramedics placed an oxygen mask over her face. "Please, you have to find my son." Mike didn't hesitate. Despite the protests of his captain and the obvious danger, he ran back into the burning house, determined to find 6-year-old Tommy Rodriguez. The structure was beginning to collapse, and Mike knew he had only minutes before the entire building would be too dangerous to enter. He found Tommy in a closet in his bedroom, unconscious, but still breathing. The little boy had instinctively hidden in the one place that had provided some protection from the smoke and flames. Mike wrapped Tommy in his own protective coat and carried him out of the house just as a section of the roof collapsed behind them. The ambulance rushed Tommy to Children's Hospital, where doctors worked through the night to treat his severe smoke, inhalation, and burns. His parents, David and Maria, were in the same hospital but in different wings, both fighting for their lives after inhaling massive amounts of toxic smoke. Mike stayed at the hospital all night, pacing the waiting room and checking with nurses for updates on the family's condition. He had saved hundreds of people during his career, but something about this case felt different. Maybe it was Tommy's age, the same age as Mike's own son would have been if he had lived. Maybe it was the way the little boy had looked so small and vulnerable in that closet, trusting that someone would come to save him. At 6 a.m., Dr. Sarah Chun emerged from the intensive care unit with news that brought both relief and heartbreak. "Tommy is going to be okay," she told Mike. "He has some burns on his arms and legs, and his lungs were damaged by the smoke, but he'll recover fully with time and proper treatment." Mike felt tears of relief streaming down his face. "And his parents?" Dr. Chun's expression grew somber. "David Rodriguez died an hour ago. The smoke damage to his lungs was too severe. Maria is in critical condition, but we're hopeful she'll pull through." The news hit Mike like a physical blow. He had saved the little boy, but he hadn't been fast enough to save his father. The guilt was overwhelming, even though Mike knew logically that he had done everything possible under impossible circumstances. "Can I see Tommy?" Mike asked. Dr. Chun nodded. He's been asking for the firefighter who saved him. He doesn't know about his father yet. We're waiting for his mother to stabilize before we tell him. Mike entered Tommy's room to find the little boy sitting up in bed, his arms and legs bandaged, but his eyes bright and alert. When Tommy saw Mike's uniform, his face lit up with recognition. "You're the firefighter who saved me," Tommy said, his voice hoarse from the smoke damage. "My mom always told me that firefighters are heroes, and now I know it's true." Mike sat down beside Tommy's bed, struggling to maintain his composure. "How are you feeling, buddy?" "I'm okay," Tommy said with the resilience that only children possess. "The doctors say I'm going to be fine. When can I go home? When can I see my mom and dad?" Mike's heart broke at the innocent question. Tommy had no idea that his father was gone, that his home had been destroyed, that his entire world had changed forever in the span of a few hours. "Your mom is getting better," Mike said carefully. "The doctors are taking really good care of her. And about your dad?" Mike's voice trailed off as he realized he couldn't be the one to deliver such devastating news to a 6-year-old child. Tommy seemed to sense that something was wrong. "Is my dad okay? He was really sick when you carried me out of the house." Mike spent the next hour with Tommy, reading him stories and playing simple games to keep the boy's mind occupied while they waited for his mother to regain consciousness. Tommy was remarkably brave, asking thoughtful questions about firefighting and expressing amazement at Mike's equipment and uniform. "Mr. Mike," Tommy said, using the name he had given the firefighter, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, buddy. You can ask me anything." Tommy's expression grew serious, and he looked directly into Mike's eyes with the kind of intensity that only children can possess when they're trying to understand something important. "Do you have a little boy like me?" The question hit Mike like a lightning bolt. He felt his breath catch in his throat as memories flooded back, memories he had spent years trying to suppress, memories of another little boy who had been 6 years old, memories of another hospital room, another tragedy that had changed his life forever. Mike began, then stopped. He had never talked about his son with anyone except his wife, and even then, the conversations were rare and painful. Tommy waited patiently for an answer, his innocent eyes filled with curiosity and trust. There was something about the boy's direct, honest question that broke through all of Mike's carefully constructed defenses. "I had a little boy once," Mike said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "His name was Danny, and he was just about your age. Where is he now?" Tommy asked with the straightforward curiosity of a child who doesn't yet understand that some questions can cause pain. Mike felt tears welling up in his eyes, tears he had been holding back for 3 years, tears he had never allowed himself to shed, even in private. "Danny got very sick when he was 6 years old," Mike said, his voice breaking. "He had cancer, and even though the doctors tried everything they could, he went to heaven." Tommy's eyes widened with understanding and sympathy that seemed far beyond his years. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mike. That must make you very sad." And with those simple, compassionate words, Mike Rodriguez, the tough, experienced firefighter who had saved countless lives and faced danger without flinching, completely broke down. The tears he had been holding back for 3 years came pouring out as he sobbed uncontrollably, finally allowing himself to grieve for the son he had lost. Tommy, despite his own pain and confusion, reached out and took Mike's hand. "It's okay to cry, Mr. Mike. My mom says that crying helps us feel better when we're sad." Mike looked at this brave little boy who was comforting him even though Tommy's own world had just been shattered, and he realized that sometimes healing comes from the most unexpected sources. Through his tears, Mike began to tell Tommy about Danny, how they used to play catch in the backyard, how Danny had wanted to be a firefighter just like his dad, how brave Danny had been during his illness, never complaining even when the treatments made him sick. "Danny sounds like he was a really good boy," Tommy said softly. "I bet he was proud to have you as his daddy." Mike nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "He was the best boy in the world, Tommy, just like you are." As they talked, Mike realized that Tommy was giving him something he hadn't experienced in 3 years, the opportunity to remember Danny with joy instead of only pain. Tommy's innocent questions and genuine interest in hearing about Danny allowed Mike to share memories that had been locked away in his heart. "Mr. Mike," Tommy said after they had been talking for a while, "I think Danny sent you to save me." Mike looked at Tommy with surprise. "What do you mean?" "Well," Tommy said with the simple logic of a 6-year-old, "you said Danny wanted to be a firefighter like you, and you said he was in heaven. So maybe he saw that I needed help, and he asked God to make sure you were the one who came to save me." The profound wisdom in Tommy's words took Mike's breath away. For 3 years, he had been angry at God, angry at the world, angry at himself for not being able to save his own son. But here was this little boy who had just lost his father and didn't even know it yet, offering him a perspective that brought comfort instead of pain. "Maybe you're right, Tommy," Mike said, wiping his eyes. "Maybe Danny did send me to you." At that moment, Dr. Chun entered the room with news that Maria Rodriguez had regained consciousness and was asking for her son. Mike knew that the next few hours would be the most difficult of Tommy's young life, as he learned about his father's death and the destruction of his home. "Tommy," Dr. Chun said gently, "your mom is awake and wants to see you. But first, I need to tell you something important." Mike watched as Dr. Chun carefully explained to Tommy that his father had died in the fire, that he wouldn't be coming home, that he was in heaven now. Tommy's reaction was heartbreaking. Confusion, denial, and then overwhelming grief as the reality of his loss sank in. "But I want my daddy," Tommy cried, his small body shaking with sobs. "I want him to come back." Mike held Tommy as he cried, remembering his own grief when Danny died, understanding the depth of pain that this little boy was experiencing. "I know you do, buddy," Mike whispered. "I know how much it hurts." "Will the hurt ever go away?" Tommy asked through his tears. Mike thought about his own journey through grief, about the pain that had consumed him for 3 years, about how Tommy's simple question had finally allowed him to begin healing. "The hurt will always be there." "Little bit," Mike said honestly, "but it will get easier." "And you know what helps?" "Remembering all the good times you had with your daddy, and knowing that he loved you very much." Over the following weeks, Mike found himself visiting Tommy and his mother Maria regularly. Maria had recovered from her injuries, but the emotional trauma of losing her husband and her home had left her struggling to cope with single parenthood. While dealing with her own grief, Mike had initially visited out of professional concern and personal guilt. But as time passed, he realized that his relationship with Tommy was helping him heal in ways he hadn't expected. Tommy's resilience, his ability to find joy even in the midst of tragedy, and his innocent wisdom reminded Mike of all the reasons he had become a firefighter in the first place. "Mr. Mike," Tommy said during one of their visits, "my mom says we have to find a new place to love because our house burned down. Will you help us?" Mike had already been thinking about how he could help the Rodriguez family. His own house had felt empty and cold since Danny's death, and his wife had moved out 6 months earlier, unable to cope with Mike's depression and emotional withdrawal. "Actually, Tommy, I have an idea," Mike said. "My house is pretty big, and it's been very quiet since Danny went to heaven. Maybe you and your mom could come stay with me for a while, until you find a new place." Maria was initially hesitant to accept such a generous offer from someone who was essentially a stranger, but Tommy's enthusiasm and Mike's genuine desire to help eventually convinced her to agree to a temporary arrangement. The day Tommy and Maria moved into Mike's house was transformative for everyone involved. Tommy's laughter and energy filled the empty rooms with life, while Maria's presence brought warmth and companionship that Mike hadn't realized he desperately needed. "This is Danny's room," Mike told Tommy as he showed him around the house. Mike had kept Danny's room exactly as it was when his son died, unable to bear the thought of changing anything. Tommy looked around the room with wonder, taking in the Firefighter posters on the walls, the toy trucks on the shelves, and the books scattered on the desk. "Can I sleep here?" he asked. Mike felt a moment of panic at the thought of someone else sleeping in Danny's bed, but then he looked at Tommy's hopeful face and realized that Danny would have wanted his room to be used by another little boy who needed it. "I think Danny would like that," Mike said softly. He always wanted a little brother to play with. That night, as Mike tucked Tommy into Danny's bed, Tommy asked another one of his profound questions. "Mr. Mike, do you think my daddy and Danny are friends in heaven?" Mike smiled through his tears. "I think they're the best of friends, Tommy. I think they're watching over both of us." 6 months after the fire, the temporary living arrangement had become something much more permanent and meaningful. Mike had legally become Tommy's guardian, with Maria's blessing, and the three of them had formed an unconventional but loving family unit. Tommy had thrived under Mike's care, excelling in school and developing a passion for helping others that reminded everyone of his firefighter guardian. Mike had returned to work with renewed purpose, no longer seeing his job as just a way to distract himself from grief, but as a calling to protect and serve others. "You know," Maria told Mike one evening as they watched Tommy play in the backyard, "I think David would be happy knowing that Tommy has you in his life. You've given him something I couldn't give him alone, a father figure who understands loss and can help him navigate his grief." Mike nodded, watching Tommy play with the same toy fire trucks that had once belonged to Danny. "Tommy has given me something too," he said. "He's given me a reason to live again, a reason to believe that good things can come from tragedy." The transformation in Mike was remarkable. His colleagues at the fire station noticed that he smiled more, laughed more, and approached his work with the passion and dedication that had made him a respected captain. He had also started a support group for first responders who had lost children, using his own experience to help others navigate their grief. Tommy's question that day in the hospital changed everything for me, Mike told the support group during one of their meetings. "He asked me if I had a little boy like him, and for the first time in 3 years, I was able to talk about Danny without feeling like I was drowning in pain." Tommy, now 7 years old, had become something of a celebrity at the fire station. He would visit regularly, learning about the equipment and procedures, and always asking thoughtful questions about how firefighters help people. "When I grow up, I want to be a firefighter like you and my daddy, Danny," Tommy told Mike one day. As they polished the fire truck together, Mike smiled, remembering how Danny had said almost the exact same thing. "I think you'll make an excellent firefighter, Tommy. You already have the most important quality. You care about helping people." On the first anniversary of the fire, Mike, Tommy, and Maria visited the cemetery where both David Rodriguez and Danny were buried. Tommy had asked to visit both graves, wanting to introduce his father to Danny and to thank Danny for sending Mike to save him. "Hi, Daddy," Tommy said, placing flowers on his father's grave. "I miss you every day, but Mr. Mike is taking really good care of me and Mom. And this is Danny," he said, turning to the smaller grave nearby. "He's Mr. Mike's son, and I think you two would be friends." Mike watched Tommy with amazement, marveling at the boy's ability to find connection and meaning even in the midst of loss. Tommy had taught him that grief doesn't have to be the end of the story. It can be the beginning of a new chapter filled with love, purpose, and hope. "Thank you, Danny," Mike whispered to his son's grave. "Thank you for sending me, Tommy. Thank you for helping me remember how to love again." As they walked back to the car, Tommy slipped his hand into Mike's. "Mr. Mike, I have another question for you." Mike smiled, knowing that Tommy's questions always led to profound moments of understanding. "What is it, buddy?" "Do you think it's okay that I love you like a daddy, even though my real daddy is in heaven?" Mike stopped walking and knelt down to Tommy's level, looking into the eyes of the little boy who had saved his life just as surely as he had saved Tommy's. "Tommy," Mike said, his voice thick with emotion, "I think your daddy would want you to have all the love in the world. And I love you like a son, just like I loved Danny. Love doesn't run out. It just grows bigger." Tommy hugged Mike tightly. And in that moment, Mike realized that sometimes the most profound healing comes not from forgetting our pain, but from allowing it to transform into something beautiful: love, compassion, and the courage to open our hearts again. The simple question that had broken Mike down in tears had ultimately built him back up, stronger and more whole than he had been before. Tommy had taught him that children have a unique ability to see through our defenses to the truth of who we are, and that sometimes the most powerful healing comes from the innocent wisdom of a child who isn't afraid to ask the questions that matter most. If this incredible story of healing, love, and the profound wisdom of children has touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more amazing true stories that prove the power of human connection and resilience. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to join our community of people who believe in the transformative power of love and the high courage to ask the questions that matter most.